Okay, how do you measure a body? How many measurements do you need for the body? It's going to take several, especially because of the position this body is in. She's sitting but yet leaning, and we want to be able to put her back in the same position when we are trying to testify in court. Granted, our photographs will show her position, but we also need to include her in our sketch. In the sketch are exact measurements, and it's important to know how many of those measurements. You would just have to play around a little bit to note of trying to pinpoint her back in this position. So since her knees are bent, we would be able to measure from her toe up to her knee. We can do the left side. We can also measure the right side from the right foot up to the right knee, kind of show exactly where the bend would be at. And then we could take two sets of measurements, how the body is positioned on the chair. And it would be easy to do that from the north wall and the west wall to be able to do that, so that we know that her bottom end is roughly 3 feet 10 inches from the north wall, and from the west wall it looks like 2 feet 6 inches. Then we would note what that description is that we would say buttocks on seat of chair. That way we would know. And then you can measure the whole distance, or since we already have it from the feet, we can just measure from the buttock area to the head, which we would be able to do the same thing from the north wall and then from the west wall. Because remember, each piece of evidence you have to have two measurements. That way you can pinpoint it exactly here. Now, this pool of blood is really critical. As you can see, there's powder burn here, which means that she was shot at close range, and the blood dripped down and then it landed here. This shows the body wasn't moved after she was shot. So there's not like someone dumped her body here and left her here. She was literally shot sitting in this chair, or she might have been standing. We won't know until we do the trajectory analysis. But we have that blood spatter on the wall. Well, blood doesn't get there all by itself. So she was shot and it went through her. There goes the blood. It'd be just splashed all over the wall. But it's important to note the size of this pool of blood. So you would have to measure two sets of measurements for it. You would measure from the west wall to where it starts. So from the west wall, it looks like it's 1 foot, 2 inches. And then we would measure from the north wall to where it starts here. And then we would do the same thing for the position over here. Probably be better to show you this way, of where it starts, the height, the peak. We're basically taking 4 measurements to show how big this pool of blood is. And you can just note that separately. You don't have to include that in the legend from the north, south, east, and west of the sketch. You can just use that as a side note. So write notes on your sketch and list those 4 measurements. Because during your sketch, you're just going to measure to the middle of that pool of blood. But we can go into more detail in our notes section with your field sketch. I always have a notes section. Under my notes, I would put the temperature. I would note whether the lights were on or off. I would put notes of anything else of observation that would be important. Like I would write the titles of those books. Maybe that has something to do with it. But I would do that all under the notes section. And you can add anything you want to that notes section. Now, another key component of sketching is that it's the height. And when you have things that are sitting on something or something that's on the wall, you have to add the H to it, which here's our can of Diet Coke. And remember, you don't drink or you don't touch anything in your crime scene. I have to measure it, so I need 2 sets of measurements for that. Or I should say 2 measurements. This can be from the east wall, that I know where it's at, and then I can do it from the south wall. The key, though, is to understand it has to be adjacent walls that you're taking your measurements from. So I would then use it from the south wall. And that looks like 8 feet, 7 inches. And then next to that, I'm going to add the letter H to my field sketch. And the H to my field sketch will be the height. And it sitting on the desk is 2 feet, 5 inches. I don't have to remeasure the height when I'm trying to do the gun because I already have the height measurement for the can of soda. So again, you want to be efficient in your sketching, and you don't want to duplicate your work. That's one of the key to success of getting your crime scene process. So I don't need to measure again with the height because I already have it here. So all I need for the weapon, which is really important, is that you just measure to the center of it. That's how we do all of our field sketch. That's how we do all of it. We measure to the middle of evidence. And if you need specific pieces of measurements, that's what goes on the note side. You would measure, let's say we want to measure how big this book is. I can easily, it's, what is it, 8 by 10, 8 by 11, whatever it would be, and I can just put that in the note section. It's not, it may be of importance or it may not be. And again, when you have a larger area, you may want to take more than one set of measurements. A set equals 2. That's where, to get from adjacent walls, from, let's say, the east wall and then the north wall. If I want to measure how big this debris area is, I can then measure it separately and stick it under the note section. For my actual field sketch, I'm just going to take a measurement to the center of it. That way it keeps it a little bit more, I say, clean and easier to read, to be able to visualize or come back and recreate this crime scene by my measurements.